He wasn't born a titan. He started out in silence, a thin, disciplined man from Cleveland who found beauty in numbers, comfort in order, and a strange kind of faith in control. Within one lifetime, however, that quiet bookkeeper, John D. Rockefeller, rose to command 90% of America's oil, the lifeblood of the industrial world. Governments tried to stop him. Competitors tried to bury him. And still, he won. Rockefeller didn't just create a company. He built a machine. It was a living, breathing system of power that could survive any storm, any reform, and even his own death. Welcome to Finance Legends, where we explore the lives of history's greatest financial minds, from their rise to their struggles to their triumphs. Today, we will dive into the extraordinary journey of John D. Rockefeller, a man who turned ambition into an empire and changed the world of finance forever. Before the world labeled him a robber baron or a saint, Rockefeller was just a man born into a brutal era. His age rewarded only the ruthless. Every empire needs a heartbeat. In the 1800s, that heartbeat ran on oil. Not the sleek black gold we know today, but a foul, heavy liquid, crude and relentless. It was refined into kerosene that burned brightly in lamps, fighting back the darkness long before electricity claimed the night. Towns like Titusville, Pennsylvania, sprang up overnight, becoming chaotic boomtowns where men dug, drilled, and gambled on the promise of fortune. Oil flooded the market, prices whiplashed, fortunes vanished as quickly as they appeared. There were no laws, no safety. There were no limits. Only greed and luck existed. It was capitalism at its wildest, and Rockefeller saw beauty in the madness. Born in 1839 and raised by a devout mother and a con-man father, Rockefeller learned early on that life was a battlefield between order and chaos. For Rockefeller, control wasn't just a strategy, it was salvation. Rockefeller was only 16 when he got his first job as a bookkeeper. It was then that he developed a deep fascination with the logic of numbers and the elegance of well-kept accounts. As he famously said, "I'd rather earn a small portion from the work of many than the whole from my own labor." When he first examined the oil business, he didn't see an easy path to riches. He saw disorder. Independent refineries constantly undercut each other, spilling profits and resources alike. In 1863, Rockefeller invested in a modest refinery in Cleveland. 7 years later, he founded Standard Oil, beginning a methodical transformation of the chaotic industry. While his competitors acted impulsively, Rockefeller calculated every move with precision. He made clever deals with railroad companies, securing transport rates lower than anyone else could manage. If rivals resisted, he would buy them out at terms they couldn't refuse. When they held firm, he would strategically lower prices, forcing them to accept mergers. By 1879, Standard Oil handled more than 90% of America's refined oil. Yet Rockefeller did not see this as a monopoly, but rather as an exercise in efficiency. He once said, "Competition is a sin." To him, mismanaged businesses wasted resources and harmed society. Every detail, each barrel, each mile of pipeline, each operating cost had to be optimized. Rockefeller also grasped a principle that most overlooked. Wealth wasn't just about producing more, it was about controlling the network. Oil had 3 key stages: extraction, refinement, and distribution. Most companies specialized in one stage. Rockefeller wanted all 3. He acquired pipelines, tanker cars, barrel manufacturers, warehouses, and shipping docks. He didn't just trade oil, he controlled its movement. Anyone entering the market had to navigate his system. Then came a revolutionary innovation, the Standard Oil Trust, which was established in 1882. This structure unified dozens of subsidiaries under a single management board that regulated production, pricing, and profits across states. The trust wasn't just a business model. It was a blueprint for modern corporations and the precursor to today's conglomerates. The term trust eventually became nearly synonymous with monopoly, and Rockefeller's relentless pursuit of efficiency caused kerosene prices to plummet by nearly 80%. While consumers enjoyed lower costs, his competitors decried his methods as ruthless. Even politicians who had once welcomed industrialists with open arms began to view Standard Oil with suspicion. Rockefeller's enterprise had grown into an empire of pipelines, legal teams, and accountants, a network that operated almost like a state of its own. To the public, Rockefeller became the most reviled man in America, a symbol of corporate overreach. But those who worked closely with him knew a different man. Calm, meticulous, and surprisingly courteous. He dressed modestly, avoided scandal, and turned to scripture daily for guidance. In his eyes, wealth was a moral responsibility, a reward for discipline and foresight. While many flaunted extravagance, Rockefeller reinvested with almost ritualistic consistency. He preached thrift, denounced waste, and expected his employees to do the same. However, power inevitably attracts resistance. In 1904, Ida Tarbell, an investigative journalist whose father had suffered under Rockefeller's business tactics, published a damning account of Standard Oil. Her reporting exposed secret railroad deals, aggressive pricing strategies, and coercive acquisitions. Public outrage swiftly followed, casting Rockefeller as the embodiment of unchecked capitalism. The federal government responded. Prosecutors began targeting the country's largest corporations, including Standard Oil, under the Sherman Antitrust Act. After 7 grueling years of litigation, the Supreme Court ruled in 1911 that Standard Oil was a monopoly and must be divided into 34 separate companies. This verdict was celebrated as a triumph for democracy, marking the end of an era. Despite this legal defeat, however, Rockefeller's influence on business, investment, and corporate strategy would endure for generations. However, Rockefeller's story didn't end with the dissolution of Standard Oil. In fact, it only transformed. He retained significant stakes, about a quarter of the shares, in each of the newly formed companies. When these firms were separated, investors scrambled to buy in. Within a year, the combined market value of companies such as Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, and Amoco had tripled, increasing Rockefeller's holdings. Ironically, the government's intervention diversified his wealth and made him richer than ever. By 1913, he had earned the title of the world's first billionaire. Adjusted for today's dollars, his fortune would surpass $400 billion, more than Musk, Bezos, and Buffett combined. He achieved this not by inventing anything new, but by masterminding a system capable of repeatedly generating wealth. Rockefeller's brilliance extended beyond mere business acumen. He recognized that immense power without public trust invites scrutiny and backlash, so he took an extraordinary step that few of his contemporaries would attempt. He reinvented himself as a philanthropist. He channeled hundreds of millions of dollars into universities, groundbreaking medical research, and public health initiatives. The Rockefeller Foundation went on to combat diseases such as hookworm and yellow fever, shape modern education, and influence the formation of the United Nations. Skeptics dismissed this as mere image polishing, while supporters hailed it as visionary leadership. In any case, Rockefeller succeeded in turning his reputation into a lasting form of capital, transforming his robber baron image into that of a benefactor with an enduring impact. Even more significant than his fortune, Rockefeller established a model for building wealth that countless billionaires would follow in the decades to come. His method can be summed up like this: identify an emerging industry, establish dominance, push back against regulation until you are untouchable, and then reshape your public image through philanthropy. By the time governments attempt to intervene, your wealth has already been strategically positioned elsewhere. When public opinion shifts, your name lives on in hospitals, schools, and cultural institutions. The structures he built didn't vanish, they multiplied. The trust model he pioneered laid the groundwork for corporate America. His approach to vertical integration, controlling every step from production to distribution, became the template for companies like Apple, Amazon, and Tesla. However, Rockefeller's genius wasn't limited to business. Through charitable foundations and policy networks, he exerted a subtle influence that extended beyond balance sheets. Even his so-called defeat, the antitrust breakup, became a lesson for future generations. When regulators later tried to dismantle giants like AT&T or Rain in modern tech companies, history repeated itself. Often, the resulting entities were stronger than the original. Rockefeller revealed a fundamental truth about wealth. Once it reaches a certain scale, it behaves like a force of nature. It reshapes its environment, pulling everything into its orbit. In this sense, money cannot be destroyed. It can only be redirected and restructured. By the time he passed away in 1937, Rockefeller had witnessed oil reshape the planet. Cars, airplanes, plastics, and the wires that carried electricity all ran on the substance he had once burned in lamps. The crude fuel of his youth had become the circulatory system of modern life. His fortune didn't die with him either. Through family trusts, foundations, and strategic investments, his wealth quietly morphed into new forms of influence spanning finance, industry, and politics. However, perhaps his deepest mark wasn't material. Rockefeller showed the world that true wealth isn't a stroke of luck. It's designed, constructed, and controlled. He didn't just find oil. He mastered leverage. Control the pipelines and you can steer the economy. Shape the story and your influence outlives generations. Look around today, and you'll see that tech giants, energy empires, and data behemoths all play by the same invisible rules. They grow quickly, dominate the market, and only apologize when it's too late. Regulators shift. They innovate around them. Public anger rises. They rebrand, pivot, and appear charitable. It's the same playbook repackaged for a new era. We call it progress, innovation, and efficiency. At its core, though, it's the same principle. Tame chaos, consolidate control, and channel the flow of value. Faces change and technologies evolve, but the engine never stops. The playbook never changed, only the players did. Each era finds its new fuel. First it was oil, now it's data. Soon it may be human attention itself. Those who own the network don't just make money, they shape the future. Rockefeller didn't discover a resource. He discovered a method. It was a blueprint for how power replicates. He knew that real wealth isn't OT stored in tanks or ledgers. It circulates through an economy like blood through veins. Once that circulation begins, it outlives the hands that built it. Rockefeller started as a quiet accountant, measuring every cent with religious precision. He ended up being the man who hard-coded the logic of capitalism itself. If this made you see the world differently, hit subscribe, because history isn't gone, it's just wearing a new suit.